Throughout the known galaxy, Corellian Engineering Corporation is famous for its rugged and versatile designs across a wide degree of ships ranging from blockade runners to freighters. But one particular ship has captured the imagination of sentient beings everywhere. That's right, the Otana. The Otana is a YT-2000 Corellian light freighter under the employ of the Twin Suns Transport Services Company, a corporate entity operated and owned by the Azameen family, with its patriarch Tomas Azameen at its head, along with the Otana acting as his personal vessel of choice when he had to head out to conduct business. It's little wonder why the YT-2000 Otana, compared to the YT-1300s in their fleet, the Sabra and the Silu, the Otana was a dream ship that could practically do everything. It could haul cargo, fight marauders, perform boarding operations, and do a wide range of other tasks the transport company would need. But to know more about the Otana, we first need to dive into the history of the YT-2000s themselves. They were originally designed to improve upon the wildly popular YT-1300, and was released sometime during the Galactic Civil War of 2 BBY to 19 ABY. Due to the increased conflict and instability of this time period, the 2000 series had heavier armament and shielding compared to other civilian light freighters and transports. Corellian Engineering Corporation gave the public rationale that piracy had increased dramatically in the ongoing conflict between the Rebel Alliance and the Galactic Empire, so their ships needed to be designed to engage in combat more readily. Although, supposedly, Imperial officials looked upon this claim with some skepticism, possibly wondering if CEC was trying to appeal to the rebel and/or pirate market. Alas, in the end, the YT-2000s did not make the same impact as the YT-1300s did, as sometime prior to its official release, CEC's rivals in the shipbuilding industry got a hold of the 2000s design schematics, which resulted in CEC suddenly being forced to rush to the market and beat their competitors with a ship that did not have enough time for proper testing, and thus the corporation had to release it with much of its rougher edges still in need of refinement. The YT-2000s did sell well, however, while owners and pilots both noticed that the ship was more touchy than the more reliable YT-1300s. These flaws in handling were overshadowed by their superior cargo capabilities, greatly improved defensive technology, and fantastic maneuverability. But they didn't stay on the market long. Corellian Engineering was not keen on having the design specs of their premier transport ship in the hands of other manufacturing firms, after all. So the YT-2000 was supplanted by the YT-2400, where one can assume that since its production details were not leaked, it allowed for the designers and engineers the time needed to smooth out the rough edges of the 2400 before market launch, unlike its sister, the YT-2000. As for what made the YT-2000 so special, we can start with arguably the most important number: its speed. Freighters, by their very nature, are not as fast as starfighters, even those designated as light freighters. However, the Otana was able to reach a top speed in spaceflight of 96 mglt at maintenance power levels. For reference, the TIE Fighter and the X-Wing both had speeds of 100 mglt at the same power levels, while the YT-1300 had a speed of 88 mglt. The 2000's armament was also a marked improvement over the 1300, with 2 laser turrets on the top and bottom for maximum coverage, along with 1 laser cannon and 1 ion cannon each mounted forward, compared to the factory default YT-1300 and its 1 forward laser cannon and 1 top-mounted turret, though it must be said that the 1300s were highly modular, as seen with the next most popular Corellian transport in galactic history, the Millennium Falcon. In other, less interesting but still important statistics, the YT-2000 had a Class 2 hyperdrive and a Class 12 backup. It came with shields, a navicomputer, accommodations for a crew of 4, 7 passengers, and a cargo capacity of 115 metric tons, which manages to edge out the YT-1300 by 15 metric tons for cargo. But to really get a feel for a ship, you need more than just technical specifications or a brief summary as to how it performed in the market. And the best way to do that sometimes, besides actually flying the thing, is through a story. In particular, the tale of the Otana and its service to the Azameen family. Tomas Azameen was an honorable man who had sympathies for the Rebel Alliance, despite the very vocal objections of his brother, Anton Azamin, who was terrified of the Galactic Empire coming in and shutting down their company, the Twin Suns Transport Services. Their long-running feud with their competitors, Firaxo Industries, only made a tenuous situation worse, making it all the more important in Anton's eyes that the Azamins not interfere with galactic politics. But Tomas, as brothers often do, didn't agree. And so he took his oldest son, Galen Azamin, along with the Otana, to find the rebels and offer their support, setting off a chain of events that would rock the Azamin family to its core and change everything. At this point in the Galactic Civil War, the Rebel Alliance had recently lost their main headquarters on Hoth to the ever-monolithic power of the Galactic Empire, having narrowly avoided the flat-out extermination of their cause in a last-minute evacuation that saved the bulk of their forces, but resulted in massive casualties with few resources to medically treat them. They needed Bacta. Bacta was an essential component of modern medical treatments throughout the galaxy, essentially a miracle fluid that could heal wounds and regenerate tissue ranging from the most mild of scrapes to highly grievous and life-threatening injuries. Obviously, this made the acquisition of Bacta an extremely high priority to the battered rebels, but certain problems with smuggler groups forced the Alliance to work through intermediaries to acquire what they needed from the black market. So enters Tomas Azamin and his rebellious sympathies. Tomas had struck a deal to acquire a supply of Bacta for the rebellion, and after some scouring, found a black market supplier willing to do business with them. Of course, though, these were smugglers, pirates, and thieves. Not exactly the most honorable of professions. While Tomas was fully willing to be a fair businessman to the outlaw group in question, he was going to back up his dealings with a show of force. This is where the rest of the Azamin clan would come into play. While Tomas and Galen would be aboard the medium transport Vasudra to conduct the business deal, Tomas's other children would be flying escort in their own spacecraft. Iman Azamin would be aboard his personal fire spray attack craft, the Andrasta, Aaron Azamin piloting the Otana, and the youngest child and newly minted pilot Ace Azamin flying the YT-1300 Sabra. Together they would travel to the meeting point in a remote part of the galaxy where they could begin their negotiations. The smuggler ship, calling itself the End Run, would have the Vasudra dock with her and begin their business. However, during the Bacta transfer operation, the captain of the End Run began reporting problems involving the transfer pumps requiring their own service technicians to go out and repair. But a short amount of time later, a keen-eyed Aaron noticed the technicians were actually sabotaging the Vasudra's engines. The smugglers were double-crossing them. Exposed in the act, the smugglers called for reinforcements nearby, summoning a Corellian gunship from hyperspace with their pirate fighters rallying to it, demanding the surrender of the Azamins and their cargo. Iman, the eldest son, curtly refused, and a battle between Azamin and pirate erupted in the void of space, the exchange of lasers heating up its cold expanse, with the Otana dancing among the stars in a ballet of elegance and destruction. But it was the Otana's fight with the pirate Corellian gunship that proved the most crucial. Better armed, armored, and bigger than anything the Azamins could bring to bear, from a purely numbers perspective, the gunship was a significant advantage to the smugglers. Not so here. Once again proving that the true alpha predator of the stars had little to do with size, the Otana humbled its Corellian cousin in quite literally an explosive fashion. The others fell quickly after that, leaving only the End Run left, alone and helpless. With the pirates destroyed, Tomas contacted his family that they were able to work things out on their end and convince the End Run captain to complete the Bacta transfer. Iman, still incensed at the double cross, made vocal his desire to space them, but Tomas, ever the father, simply said, "Sorry boy, that's not a good way to do business," quickly following up with the fact that he allowed them to leave peacefully if they just gave them the Bacta. Returning home triumphant, Tomas was able to contact the rebels with the good news about their newly acquired prize. Rebel Command's response was swift. Tomas and Galen would be back aboard the Vasudra to deliver the Bacta, while Iman would be flying escort again aboard the Andrasta. However, this time flying the Otana would be little brother Ace, who had quickly showed off his natural talent for space combat with the End Run smugglers. While Aaron, who piloted the Otana previously, was a competent pilot, her skills were more technical in nature, so in the end it was decided it was better for Ace to pilot the family's prized ship. It was believed by the Azamine family that nothing would go wrong, besides a remote possibility the smugglers they tangled with previously might come after them again. But as MK, Ace's trusty co-pilot droid, would state, "At least with the Rebels, you don't have to worry about your ship being hijacked." The Azamines were led to a small Rebel hospital in a remote part of the galaxy. Here the survivors of Hoth would be treated of their injuries and hopefully be returned to the fight against the Empire. But the number of casualties were long, and it was clear their facilities were overwhelmed. The Vasudra quickly began its operation to transfer the Bacta and its stores to the hospital station, with Iman and Ace flying patrol with seemingly nothing else to do. But before boredom could take hold in the two Azamine brothers, an Imperial Star Destroyer dropped out of hyperspace right on top of the hospital, immediately deploying TIE fighters and bombers into the field and demanding the surrender of all vessels under penalty of death. Galen, still aboard the Vasudra, helpfully summarized their situation over the comms by stating, "I'm just gonna say this once. Our luck stinks." The Otana and Andrasta were ordered to join the X-Wing fighter screen by the Rebel commander. They were vastly outnumbered, and even delaying the Imperials long enough for a complete evacuation of the hospital would be a miracle in itself. But Galen and Tomas were still aboard the Vasudra, which had just been commandeered by the Rebels to help in the evacuation. They would have zero chance of survival if Ace and Iman did not put up the fight of their lives in the next hour. Here is where the Otana proved its true power in the field of battle. Its twin turrets controlled by MK blasted one TIE starfighter after another, bobbing and weaving like a boxer in his prime amongst the vast ring of space, while occasionally tanking a hit that did little to stop her destructive fury. But the Imperials were too many, and the Rebels were too few, with their numbers dwindling even more at the slow bleeding of their ships to the unending assault. But still, thanks to the sacrifices of the defenders and the work of the Azamine brothers, at least 2/3 of the Rebel forces at the hospital were able to flee the area to safety. But as the Vasudra began to undock, Imperial assault transports disabled the Azamine vessel, trapping Tomas and Galen to await the mercy of Imperial interrogators. There was nothing that could be done at this point. The Rebel defenders were falling apart. The attack from the Imperials was too great to overcome to attempt a rescue of the Vasudra, and with more Imperial reinforcements on the way, Ace and Iman would be joining their father and brother in an Imperial detention cell if they stayed for much longer. As elder brother, it fell to Iman to make the call. So he did, and ordered Ace aboard the Otana to hyperspace out of the area with him. This was a black day indeed. With the capture of Tomas and Galen, the Imperials would soon know to come after the rest of the family in the Twin Suns Transport Services Company, which they began to do. Making matters worse, the Varaxo, their longtime rivals, were to be given provisional control of all Twin Suns holdings, with the implication being that the entire operation and the location of the Rebel hospital were exposed to the Imperials by the Varaxo to stomp out their competition for good. Wasting no time, Anton, Aaron, Iman, Ace, and MK moved to retrieve certain assets that were to be used in case of an emergency such as this, then regroup and make a run for the Outer Rim territories where the Imperials would hopefully not be able to find them. Anton and Iman would go to their cargo facilities, while Aaron and Ace, aboard the Sabra and Otana respectively, would head to the family's repair yard, the Twin Suns Service Depot, to collect the emergency supplies there. But the Imperials were one step ahead. As Aaron and Ace began to retrieve their supplies, an Imperial Star Destroyer with the Varaxo force had come in to claim the station for themselves. Ace had finished picking up his container, but Aaron had still not completed her own task. But it was not a problem, MK, who was aboard the Otana, happily said, as he and Ace would be able to hold off their oppressors. And much like with the End-Run bandits in the Battle of the Rebel Hospital, the Otana once again was the decisive factor. TIE fighters, bombers, and Varaxo fighters were no match for the power of Corellian engineering personified, especially with Ace and MK at the helm, taking hits, dodging them, and even returning their blows tenfold with a passionate fury that turned the space around them into a salvager's treasure trove. But eventually, Ace and MK's fun had to come to an end as Aaron reported that she had finished retrieving the family assets. So in order to avoid the same catastrophic end like their father and brother, they had to hyperspace back to the Azamine station. Iman joined them shortly after, who reported that they too were ambushed by Imperials. But whereas the Azamine children were able to escape, Anton was captured. which was a terrible thing to happen, as Anton was the only one who knew where they could find refuge. At this point, Varaxo fighters dropped out of hyperspace and began their attack run against the Azamine survivors. Still not willing to succumb to the dire nature of their situation, Ace and MK took the Otana and tore the Varaxo squadron to pieces. Having bought themselves some time, Eren realized that their family friend, Olin Garn, who had joined the rebellion recently, had given her coordinates to a rebel fleet if they were ever in serious trouble. With no place left to go, it seemed like the best option. Which was good, as an Imperial Star Destroyer was apparently not too far behind the Varaxo force that previously assaulted the Azamines, and had just dropped out of hyperspace on top of them, ready to seize the last of the Azamine family and what remained of their company. So suddenly, there was no more room for debate. Once again dodging capture by the Imperials, the Azamine family fled to what they hoped would be safe harbor for them. The tale of the Azamines does not end here, far from it. However, the scope of their story is far beyond the subject at hand. They were able to find a place among the Rebel Alliance, with Ace becoming a rebel pilot himself. But the Azamines, and more specifically the Otana, would still be brought out again to help in the efforts to rebuild the family and engage in a multitude of different adventures. But those, as always, are other stories to be told on another day. Its time as the hot new spacecraft on the market from Corellian engineering may have been short-lived, but that did little to change what the YT-2000 and the Otana actually was. A highly mobile, well-armed, and exceptionally versatile spacecraft that did not just haul freight from one point to another, but could challenge the deadliest ships the galaxy had to offer. One only need to look at the adventures of the Otana and how it served the Azamine family for evidence of that.